The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Ohio will hold its primary election a month from today on May the 6th, but early voting opened last week on April the 1st. This is the election that members of political parties not only select candidates who will represent the party in November, as well as hundreds of precinct executives. Though some races are contested, most are not. Very few are high-profile races with truly open seats. And the reality is that incumbents have an overwhelming advantage. In addition, one statewide and various local issues will appear on ballots. A particularly interesting category of tax issues involves cities and townships trying to find ways to fund basic services in the face of massive state cuts of funding for local governments. But we begin our election preparation this morning in Hamilton County with a request for a renewal of funding for the levy that supports people with developmental disabilities. Issue 3 is a 5-year levy renewal for community developmental disabilities programs. This is a levy that is 40 years old, and this year's request is for a simple renewal of 4.13 mils, the amount that is already in place, which cost $118.30 for every $100,000 of property valuation and will generate $72.65 million a year for 5 years. The levy accounts for 72% of the revenue of the Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services. The board uses those funds to support 300 community agencies delivering services that annually serve 9,000 adults and children. I am joined now by Alice Pavey, the superintendent of Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services. She has worked with people with developmental disabilities in Montgomery, Franklin, and Hamilton counties, as well as the state of Ohio for the last 32 years, assuming a progressively larger responsibilities. And Nestor Melnyk is the president of the board of Hamilton County Developmental Disability Services. Mr. Melnyk is an architect and a principal with MSA Architects. He has served on the Ohio Developmental Disabilities Council, chairing the Children's Issues Committee. Mr. Melnyk and his wife have a son who attends Bobby Fairfax School that is operated by Hamilton County Developmental Disabilities Council. Welcome to Newsmakers. And I think in both cases, yes. Nestor, let's begin by, developmental disabilities is the term that is used. And I sort of stumbled over something because the levy title on the ballot still uses some old language, but this is what we're talking about. What's the range of people? How do they manifest developmental disabilities? What's the range of people who are served by the programs?
Well, developmental disabilities does encompass a very wide variety of individuals, but primarily it is any permanent cognitive or physical disability that's manifest by the age of 22. So it's either a condition that you're born with, a syndrome, or it could be an accident or something that happens that occurs in your early life before the age of 22 that's ongoing and permanent, will require permanent services. And,
for those of us who don't know, sort of can give us some concrete examples of, say, some ranges of what we're dealing with.
Well, sure. This is Autism Awareness Month, and autism is a perfect example of that. We hear it quite often these days, and that is a spectrum disorder. There are very high-functioning individuals with autism that can function on their own, and then there are those that really need full-time 24/7 supports just in order to maintain their daily activity and their daily needs.
And we have a range here of people, not only on the autism spectrum, but in the total field, some people who can become independent or autonomous with some help and work and contribute, and other people who really need a lot of support, right?
That's absolutely right. There are some individuals who are considered medically fragile that may need intense medical assistance as well as assistance with daily living. And then there are those individuals that can successfully be out in the community, hold a small job, do some things on their own, have their own apartment, and really have a very independent life. And that's one of the focuses of the DD Services Board, is to really foster that within individuals, to let people live to their potential, to do what they can do, to be able to in some way even contribute back to society, to give back and not just always be receiving supports.
Alice, a related question. One of the things I mentioned here in trying to set this up is that the money that you receive as the services, or the board, you then send out to 300 different agencies. Are there some programs you run directly? And then give us an example, or just a couple of examples of agencies that you support through this funding.
Sure. We actually have an early intervention program in which we serve over 800 individuals, children birth to 3. And we have case managers who work with them in their family homes. We also have 2 schools, Bobby B. Fairfax and Rost School, which we house about 168 students from 22 different school districts. And these are kids that can't be served as well as we can serve them in our school, in their local school districts, because of
even
cost.
with all the efforts at mainstreaming, these
Absolutely.
are children who need to be in a special school.
Right. Many of them are medically fragile or have intense needs. We also have our adult centers. We have 4 adult centers, and we provide work experiences for them on a daily basis, and we serve about 700 people in those settings. Now, some of our community partners are Goodwill, which you're very familiar with. Years ago, the board decided that they were going to spread some of the work to other agencies, and Goodwill has been doing that for many years for us. We also have a large contract with Easter Seals Tri-State, which is the connection between Jewish Vocational Services and Easter Seals.
Right.
So we have a lot of community partners that we work with.
Yeah, so I mean, the point is that people would know a lot of those community partners, even if they don't know the board directly. And
Correct.
so, and I think that's sort of, it's embedded there. I want to get at some of the recommendations that were made by the Tax Levy Review Commission. They approved this levy, they supported the levy as a renewal, but they had some recommendations, and Alice, let's start with you. No, actually, Nestor, let's start with you, because your son is at Bobby Fairfax.
That's right.
Bobby B. Fairfax, I guess, is the right way to say it. Okay, school. And one of their recommendations was that the cost of transporting the children, no matter what district they come from, as Alice was saying, to that school or to Ross, that that be borne by the school systems rather than by the board. What kind of pushback are you going to get from the school systems on that? I mean, they're also pressed.
That's right, and honestly, it's a shift of funding and responsibility. Ultimately, there's a lot of pressure to say, let's close the schools, because that is the Department of Education's responsibility, and our children should be educated within the school districts and not have us operate our own schools. What we find, though, is that there is no one-size-fits-all. Just like there are spectrums within disorders, there is a large variety of individuals that we need to serve, and even among the population of children. Some of the school districts just can't do that. They don't have the resources, it's more economical, and the individuals benefit from having all the experts and the resources in one place in a school. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. I fully support inclusion and mainstreaming, but we have to realize that not everyone is the same. So what's happening is that the school districts, of course, are looking for those efficiencies as well, so they may not want to have to provide transportation for 1 or 2 individuals to go to a different location. And I think there will be obviously some pushback of the way we fund a lot of our programs, unfortunately, are in buckets and silos, and so we have to decide who funds what.
Yeah, that seems like such a simple recommendation, but it screams problems to me.
That's right. That's right.
In terms of implementation.
Right.
I don't know if it's the right thing or not, but and then a second recommendation, and this is one actually, Alice, that just jumped off the page to me, and that was replace higher cost employees who will retire as a result of PRS and STRS, the state retirement funds, with people who are lower cost employees. Well, yes, from a financial point of view, but does that mean that Tax Levy Review Commission is encouraging you to get rid of your most experienced people? Because tied to this is also an early retirement incentive program. So that all may sound good for an individual, but what's it do for the expertise of the people working?
Well, actually, we lose a lot of expertise. In fact, we have over 67 employees who have 25 years or more in our system. So what we need to do is do a good succession plan for those people that may be leaving so that we can carry that information on with us as they go.
When they're saying early retirement, how early do we start buying people out and giving them incentives?
Well, actually, the early retirement incentive we've had before have been for 2 years. So typically, people are wanting to get to their 30 years in the retirement system. Okay. So they may have 28 years in.
Okay. So, all right, but still could be very relatively young people.
Yes, it could be.
The other thing I want to raise in this is in that Tax Labor Review Commission, there's a provision that there could be a clawback if the expansion of Medicaid in Ohio, which Governor Kasich supported, and/or the Affordable Care Act, as it kicks in and we come to know what it really means, which nobody really does at this point, there could be a clawback down the road because there could be funds coming from other sources. How does the board feel about that and how that particular recommendation?
Well, honestly, right now we're in a major period of uncertainty because there are many changes that are occurring. Not only do we have what the Affordable Care Act may, how that may affect us, there are new CMS rules which affect rules for Medicaid and Medicare, a lot of external factors, flat funding, the fact that our population is increasing on both ends. We serve people from birth to death. We have more new diagnoses coming in an early age. We have longer lifespans of the individuals we serve. There's so much uncertainty right now, and that's also why this levy is so critical and so important, so that we can maintain the funding that we have been receiving and not lose 70% of our funding. So we don't know how that's really going to affect us. Our initial review is that it probably will not, because of the services that we provide are not overlapping with those healthcare services, but we do not know. And if they do, I would hope that if they do pull some funding from the services that we provide, that those services would then therefore be funded in a different way. Is
the increase of people who need your assistance on young children, you're saying that's growing, is that related to this report that recently came out from the Cincinnati Health Department about infant mortality? Now that's in case of mortality, but are we having more problematic births? Is this another reflection of some real health issues and social issues we got in this community?
Well, I don't necessarily think so. I think that healthcare has gotten so much better now. People are living through what they typically did not live before, but they have issues or they have delays that we need to help them overcome. So we are seeing a lot more children that way.
Yeah. Nestor, I know you served on the state council that I referenced in your introduction. So you've seen this from the statewide view. How's Hamilton County viewed? When I went to the state council, and my son had been receiving services through the county board, and I never really knew. You don't know how good things are until you start to see the other side. On the statewide basis, Hamilton County is looked up to very frequently. We're a model board in terms of how we serve our individuals, pilot programs, thinking outside the box. I mentioned earlier there is no one-size-fits-all. Hamilton County is so good at understanding that and dealing with those issues. Well, both of you and all the people you work with deserve credit. If you want to know more about this issue and the organization, here are some websites. Go to the DD website or the League of Women Voters to get background on this issue. Stay tuned. Cincinnati has become nationally famous for its leadership in transforming schools into community learning centers. That's why hundreds of educators from all over the country will meet here this coming week.
It's about keeping community in schools by establishing community learning centers. And the reality for us at CPS is that while other urban districts are in decline, we are on the rise.
sometimes we are just too close to a situation to appreciate what's happening. That is certainly true in the case of the Cincinnati Public Schools. It's become such a habit to complain about public schools, which really means Center City schools, not the Wyoming, Marymount, or Madeira public schools, that people outside our area understand better what is happening here than many of us. Later this week, the National Coalition of Community Schools will hold its annual conference here in Cincinnati. The coalition chose Cincinnati because of the work here with community learning centers. For the past several years, the development of community learning centers has attracted visitors from around the United States, not just educators, but politicians and the national media, from the New York Times to National Public Radio. I am joined this morning by Eve Bolton, the president of the Cincinnati Board of Education, and PG Sittenfeld. This morning, PG is not wearing his city council hat, but his educator hat as the assistant director of the Community Learning Center Institute. He manages community engagement and communications for the Institute. Both of you, welcome back.
Great to be here, Dan.
Thanks for having us.
To Newsmakers. Again, you know, something like community learning centers, if you pay attention to the schools, you know this is really an exciting thing. But Eve, for people who don't really know what's going on here, what's a community learning center?
Community Learning Center is old school and new school. We made a promise over a decade ago to make our brand new schools into community learning centers, which meant that they would be almost, well, you're an old history teacher, like the Northwest Ordinance, where in the middle of the land that was plotted out, there'd be a school. And that schoolhouse would be the center of the community. And indeed, we've continued that tradition, rediscovered that tradition, if you will. So we provide academic support before and after school, more enhancement of special programs, also provide additional health and dental care, the kinds of services that many of our students need. And we are committed as a school board, and have been for over a decade now, to make sure that all 50-some of our schools are community learning centers. So they're not just for those schools that may be in neighborhoods of poverty, but indeed all of our neighborhoods want to have community learning centers.
But what a community learning center is in any one community or any one neighborhood, any one school, can be a little bit different, right, PG?
Absolutely, totally meant to be customized. I mean, I think there are two main goals. One, support students and academic outcomes. So obviously, if a student has dental pain and you can have them see a dentist inside the school, that's going to help them learn better. But also, as Eve pointed out, I mean, this is about community revitalization. How can you make this a hub of neighborhood activity, recreational, cultural events, so that the neighborhood really looks at this taxpayer-funded space, this facility with basketball courts, meeting spaces, computer clusters, and have it be used round the clock and really pull the community together. We're seeing that a lot of places, and I appreciate you saying that, you know, sometimes when you're close to something, you don't appreciate it as much. A few weeks ago, we had the new mayor of New York City, Mayor de Blasio, use the word extraordinary to describe what he saw when he visited Cincinnati, and now mighty New York City wants to replicate what we're doing here in Cincinnati.
In fact, he also used in that presentation the term the Cincinnati model. Now, he wanted to say most people call it the Cincinnati model, but he had this other idea. But
we're branding it with the Cincinnati model.
Yeah, which puts us out front.
Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned the conference, and I do, just for folks who, you know, might not have known it was coming, this is 1,500 genuine leaders from across the country, even across the world, school superintendents, elected officials, United Way CEOs, and on and on and on, who are coming where? To Cincinnati, Ohio, to learn about our best-in-class model of using schools.
And they're coming here because of the progress with community learning centers.
There are going to be site visits to CPS community learning centers throughout the conference.
Eve, one of the keys to the community learning centers, besides what happens in those centers and schools, is the collaboration with community organizations. This is not just the schools create. You were mentioning a health center or a dental center, but it's not just the schools creating these things. It's working with community organizations in a collaborative fashion.
You
right?
couldn't be more correct. And really, again, it's Cincinnati history. We have a great history of partnerships, both public and public. I'm wondering if you took mine.
Yeah, you're too young.
I wish that were true. But at any rate, I think that we have created public-public partnerships, public-private partnerships, corporate, nonprofits, and it isn't an extension merely of the school, but indeed it's the community coming into the school, and more particularly in these times tight times regarding monies, one of the parts of the Cincinnati model is that for most intents and purposes, it is self-sustaining financially. So this is not money coming out of the general revenue of Cincinnati Public.
Let's explain how that might happen. And the learning center that I know best is at Euler. Okay, which is very intensely developed. So you have a dental clinic and you have a health clinic. We have some video, I think, that we might be able to show. How do those services get paid for if it's not coming out of the Cincinnati Public Schools?
In part, the partners are paying for it. Also, indeed, reimbursements regarding Medicaid are part of it. So people are actually finding where their customers are at a young age, as well as the families of our school students. And so it's a matter of not only customizing, but finding the customers for those services. And then that improves what we do. I was having a dinner with some friends, and a granddaughter of one of my friends mentioned that she had to get glasses. And and the grandmother was sitting right across from me. How much is that going to cost? It's, you need them, we'll get them. She said, well, they tested me at Euler and I can get them free. And the grandmother was like, that's great, because the mom indeed has some issues about financially being able to do what she needs to do for a child.
Dan, this is a really important point. I mean, the model here is about realignment of existing resources and put them where they most make sense. And again, this notion that the school is the centerpiece, the school is the hub for the neighborhood. If you need to act, whether it's, you know, an after-school program or whether it's health services, where are you going to have more access to students, to their families, to the surrounding neighborhood than a school that, were it not for this model, might be sitting dormant or empty? That's not a good return on investment for taxpayers.
You know, another element of the Learning Center at Euler that I'm aware of is the Early Learning Center, run by Patty Gleason, Cincinnati Early Learning Center, which is probably the best early learning center operation in this city. And it serves that entire community. And they too, right, if I'm correct, they have a financial model which makes that work. So Cincinnati Public Schools is not paying for that.
That's exactly true. And I think one of the things you said at the very beginning regarding public schools and almost the attacks, what these also do is, besides revitalize neighborhoods, they also start to rebuild the trust that many of us can remember existed between public schools and the public. And indeed, when you're helping someone's child, or when indeed it's extended to that family and that family feels more comfortable coming into that school, we have rebuilt the trust. And with that, all kinds of things are possible.
I think that the public trust piece is absolutely huge. And when the community feels a sense of ownership of these schools, it restores that trust. Dan, when I was growing up, if there was a levy on the ballot, it was almost a foregone conclusion that it wouldn't pass. Since the Community Learning Center initiative was started a little bit more than a decade ago, you know, renewals have passed almost every time, maybe every time, and I certainly support the passage of the renewal that's going to be on the ballot this coming fall, because something that's working is being shown to the citizens.
How many, I know there are different sized, we've talked about some are much more intensely developed than others, but how many community learning centers are there in the Cincinnati Public School system right now?
So to the board's credit and to our predecessors, the school board's credit, they laid out a model. Every school in the entire district will be a community learning center. Now we think of sort of full implementation when there's a full-time site-based resource coordinator. So the organization that I'm, again, not wearing my council hat, but wearing my Community Learning Center Institute hat, we hire site-based school resource coordinators, and they're like, you can think of them as the chief operations officer for all of the partnerships. That's full implementation. That said, every school in the district has some level of the Community Learning Center infrastructure. So it's district-wide, which is also unique across the country.
And at the full level, we have, I believe, about 34 of the 54, 55 schools that have the full level. And we are destined and committed to have all of them be at that level. But again, customized to that neighborhood, to that school program.
Can I make one other just results-based point?
Could I stop you?
It's your show, Dan. I mean, I think sometimes folks say, well, it sounds warm and fuzzy, but sort of where's the beef? Since this was initiated, the state recently changed their state report card. But the academics, the school district went from academic emergency to academic watch to continuous improvement to effective. It became the highest rated urban district in the state. The academic performance index rose over 30 points. So this is working. I mean, you know, if you want scientific measurements, it really is working.
So pulling this convention in at the end of this week draws national attention for local people if they wanted to know more about, they don't have children or grandchildren in the schools anymore, and they wanted to visit a school and see a community learning center, who should they contact?
Let's put Eve Bolton's cell phone on the screen.
Oh,
right?
absolutely, and that'll be good. But I think the best thing to do is to contact our Public Affairs Department. And indeed, in the Public Affairs Department, Julie Doppler is the person that coordinates those kinds of efforts. And we'd be glad to have people come in. And we look forward to having people get reacquainted with Cincinnati Public.
And by the same token, if folks want to engage the Community Learning Center Institute, which is a
It's
deep
online.
partner of CPS, look us up. We'd be happy to host a tour as well.
Okay, and we make sure that Leadership Cincinnati visits Cincinnati Early Learning.
Come off.
Yes, because it's important for people to understand. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on attracting this convention, and have fun.
Thanks so much.
Conventions are for fun.
That should be great.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week to meet the men and the women working to build a better region for the future. Have a good week.
Great.